In the quiet corridors of history, a shadow often lengthens, unnoticed at first. It is the shadow of figures who emerge, seemingly from nowhere, yet with a profound impact on the human spirit. In every age, across every culture, these individuals rise. They step onto the stage of human affairs, often at moments when societies are most vulnerable, when people are searching for meaning, for guidance, for a steady hand in turbulent times. Their appearance can feel like a sudden dawn, a promise of clarity in a world shrouded in confusion. They arrive with pronouncements that resonate deeply with the anxieties and hopes of the masses, offering what seems like a clear path forward. These are not ordinary leaders or thinkers. They claim a unique connection to the divine, a special insight into the mysteries of existence. They present themselves as conduits of a higher truth, messengers sent to enlighten or to save. Their voices, though new, carry an unnerving echo of ancient patterns, a timeless strategy of influence. The methods may adapt, the language may shift to suit the era, but the core phenomenon persists. It is a recurring theme in the grand narrative of human belief, a testament to our enduring search for transcendence and our susceptibility to its imitation. The stage is always set for their arrival in the hearts of those who yearn. The rise is often subtle, a gradual insinuation into the spiritual landscape. They do not always announce themselves with thunder and lightning. Instead, they might begin with quiet acts of charity, with words of comfort, slowly building a foundation of trust. They cultivate an image of unwavering devotion, of selfless service, drawing people in with a gentle magnetism. It is a carefully orchestrated ascent, designed to disarm skepticism and foster dependence. Before the full extent of their agenda becomes clear, they have already woven themselves into the fabric of their followers' lives, becoming indispensable sources of wisdom and authority. This careful cultivation of an image is their first, most crucial deception. We must ask ourselves why this pattern repeats with such relentless consistency. Is it a flaw in human nature, a yearning so profound that it blinds us to the wolves in sheep's clothing? Or is it a testament to the power of belief itself, a force so potent that it can be wielded for both liberation and subjugation? Understanding this perennial emergence is the first step towards discerning the genuine from the counterfeit. It requires us to look beyond the immediate moment, to recognize the historical echoes, and to approach claims of absolute spiritual authority with a vigilant and discerning heart, always questioning the source of the light they offer. These figures who rise to wield such influence are masters of disguise. They understand the power of appearances, the deep-seated human respect for symbols of holiness. Thus, they are invariably clothed in faith. Their garments are often simple, yet they carry the weight of tradition, suggesting a lineage of piety, a direct connection to the sacred. They might adopt the robes of a revered order, the humble attire of an ascetic, or the distinguished dress of established clergy. Every element of their presentation is meticulously crafted to project an image of spiritual authority and unshakable devotion. This visual language of sanctity is potent, bypassing rational thought and speaking directly to our emotional and spiritual desires. Beyond their attire, it is their words that weave the most intricate spell. They speak in certainties. In a world filled with doubt and ambiguity, their unwavering conviction can be incredibly alluring. They offer definitive answers to life's most profound questions, leaving no room for hesitation or questioning. Their pronouncements are delivered with a force that suggests divine inspiration, as if they are merely channels for a truth that flows from a higher realm. This confident articulation of complex matters simplifies the world for their followers, providing a sense of order and security. The power of their rhetoric lies not just in what they say, but in the absolute assurance with which they say it, making doubt seem like a failing of faith. This performance of piety extends to their public demeanor and private counsel. They often exhibit an exaggerated humility, deflecting personal praise while subtly reinforcing their unique status. They might speak of visions, of divine encounters, of burdens they bear for the sake of humanity. These narratives further solidify their image as individuals set apart, chosen for a special purpose. The certainty they project is not just intellectual, it is emotional and spiritual, creating an atmosphere where their words are received not as opinions or interpretations, but as sacred truths. This carefully constructed persona is designed to inspire awe and unquestioning loyalty, making it difficult for followers to challenge their authority or motives. The allure of this masked sanctity is a powerful force, drawing in those who are searching for spiritual guidance and a sense of belonging. It preys on the innate human desire for connection with something greater than oneself. When confronted with such a compelling display of apparent holiness and unwavering certainty, critical faculties can be suspended. The veil of virtue they wear is often so convincing that it blinds followers to the subtle manipulations at play. It is a reminder that true spirituality is not always found in the most ostentatious displays of piety, but often in quieter, more humble expressions of genuine compassion and integrity. The pronouncements from these self-proclaimed envoys of the divine are often grand and inspiring, filled with promises of salvation, enlightenment, and a better world. They say, "We are chosen, we are holy." These declarations serve to elevate them above ordinary mortals, creating a hierarchy where their word becomes law, their insights unquestionable. They cultivate an aura of exceptionalism, suggesting that they possess a unique mandate from a higher power, a special grace that sets them apart. This claim of being divinely selected is a cornerstone of their authority, justifying their demands for obedience and loyalty from their followers. It creates a powerful psychological dynamic, where to question them is to question the divine itself. However, a stark and often disturbing chasm exists between their lofty words and their earthly actions. While their mouths speak of spiritual transcendence and selfless service, their hands often drip with control. This control can manifest in myriad ways, from the subtle manipulation of emotions to the overt regulation of their followers' lives. They might dictate personal choices, from relationships and careers to finances and daily routines. The proclaimed holiness becomes a justification for intrusion, the claimed chosenness a license to dominate. Their followers, believing they are submitting to a divine will, gradually cede their autonomy, their critical thinking, and their personal power to these charismatic leaders. The discrepancy is not always immediately apparent, especially to those caught within their sphere of influence. The control is often framed in spiritual terms, as guidance for the soul's salvation, or as necessary discipline for spiritual growth. Financial contributions are painted as offerings to God, unquestioning obedience as a mark of true faith, and the suppression of dissent as protection against heresy or evil influences. The leaders themselves may accumulate wealth, power, and privileges, all while preaching simplicity, humility, and detachment from worldly concerns. This hypocrisy is masked by layers of religious rhetoric and the carefully maintained illusion of their selfless devotion to a higher calling. This chasm between proclaimed sanctity and the pursuit of power reveals the true nature of their mission. The words are merely tools, instruments to achieve an end that is far from divine. The holiness they project is a carefully constructed facade, designed to disarm and deceive. The power they accumulate is not used to uplift humanity or to serve a greater good, but to consolidate their own authority and to perpetuate their influence. Recognizing this divide is crucial for anyone seeking genuine spiritual truth, for it highlights the profound difference between those who genuinely serve a higher purpose and those who merely use the language of faith to serve themselves. One of the most insidious tactics employed by those who misuse religious authority is the manipulation of emotion, particularly the potent force of fear. While genuine faith often speaks of love, compassion, hope, and liberation, the mouths of these false prophets frequently echo fear. They paint vivid pictures of damnation, of divine retribution for disobedience, of worldly chaos from which only they can offer protection. This cultivated atmosphere of anxiety serves to keep their followers dependent and compliant. Fear becomes a powerful motivator, compelling adherence not out of genuine conviction or love, but out of a desperate desire to avoid punishment or to gain a promised exclusive salvation. This emphasis on fear effectively stifles critical thought and questioning. When individuals are constantly bombarded with messages of impending doom or the spiritual dangers of doubt, they are less likely to challenge the pronouncements of their leaders. Questions are reframed as evidence of weak faith, or worse, as temptations from malevolent forces. The community of believers itself can become a tool of enforcement, where members police each other, reporting dissent or skepticism as signs of spiritual straying. Love, which is expansive and inclusive, is replaced by a fear that is constricting and exclusionary, creating a closed system where external perspectives are viewed with suspicion and hostility. The narrative of fear is often woven into the very fabric of their teachings. They might interpret sacred texts selectively, highlighting passages that speak of judgment and wrath while downplaying or ignoring those that emphasize mercy, forgiveness, and universal love. They create an us versus them mentality, portraying the outside world as corrupt and dangerous, and their group as the sole bastion of truth and safety. This isolation further reinforces their control, as followers become increasingly disconnected from alternative viewpoints and support systems. The fear of losing community, of being cast out into the perceived darkness, becomes another chain binding them to the group and its leader. Ultimately, a faith built on fear is not true faith at all. It is a sophisticated form of psychological coercion. It does not empower individuals, it disempowers them. It does not lead to spiritual growth, it leads to spiritual stagnation, trapped in a cycle of anxiety and appeasement. True spiritual paths encourage exploration, understanding, and the development of inner strength, not a cowering submission to external authority driven by threats. The language of fear is a clear indicator that the message being delivered is not aimed at liberating the soul, but at ensnaring it for purposes far removed from genuine spiritual enlightenment or divine love. Section 5. The Altar of Ambition, when power becomes the true idol. When we strip away the layers of pious pronouncements, the carefully crafted images of holiness, and the manipulative rhetoric of fear, we often find a stark and unsettling truth at the core. These figures, who claim to speak for God, who demand unwavering devotion, do not truly serve God. Their ultimate allegiance, their deepest worship, is directed elsewhere. They serve power. The acquisition, maintenance, and expansion of their own influence and control become the driving forces behind their actions. The religious framework they adopt is merely a vehicle, the most effective means to achieve this worldly ambition, preying on humanity's deepest spiritual yearnings. This pursuit of power manifests in various forms. It can be the accumulation of vast personal wealth, siphoned from the contributions of trusting followers who believe they are giving to a divine cause. It can be the establishment of sprawling organizations that grant the leader immense authority and prestige. It can be the ability to sway political opinions, to command armies of loyalists, or to dictate the social and moral codes of entire communities. In every instance, the supposed spiritual mission becomes secondary to, or a justification for, the consolidation of this earthly dominion. The sacred is profaned, used as a stepping stone to worldly thrones, whether literal or metaphorical. True servitude to a divine principle, to a God of love, justice, and compassion, is fundamentally incompatible with an insatiable hunger for personal power over others. Genuine spiritual leaders empower their followers, encouraging them to find their own connection to the divine, to think for themselves, and to act with moral autonomy. They seek to uplift, not to dominate. In contrast, those who serve power seek to create dependence, to foster unquestioning obedience, and to position themselves as indispensable intermediaries between the believer and the sacred. Their aim is not to lead others to God, but to lead others to themselves, making their own authority the object of veneration. The tragedy lies in the exploitation of sincere faith. Millions seek solace, meaning, and a connection to something greater than themselves, only to have their devotion rerouted towards the aggrandizement of an individual. This worship of power, disguised as religious fealty, is a profound betrayal of the trust placed in these leaders. It is a corruption that not only harms the followers, but also tarnishes the very idea of faith, leading many to cynicism and despair. Recognizing that the true idol for these false prophets is power itself, is the first crucial step in reclaiming authentic spirituality and dismantling the empires built on deception. Section 1. The Sacred Promise. Faith as a liberating dawn. Religion, in its purest essence, was never intended to be a fortress of dogma. It was meant to be a key to unlock the vast potential residing within the human mind. Its purpose was to free us from the shackles of superstition, from the darkness of unknowing. It whispered of inquiry, of exploration, of the courage to ask profound questions about existence itself. This was its first promise to expand our understanding, not to confine it within narrow, unyielding walls. True faith was to be a journey of discovery, an awakening of the intellect, leading towards a greater clarity, a more profound connection with the universe and our place within its grand design. Beyond the realm of the mind, faith was destined to uplift the human heart. It sought to offer solace in times of despair, to instill hope when shadows loomed large. It spoke of compassion, of empathy, of an interconnectedness that binds all beings. This sacred impulse aimed to nurture the soul, to provide a sanctuary of peace and a fountain of inner strength. It was about finding joy, meaning, and a profound sense of belonging. Religion, in its uncorrupted form, was a beacon calling us towards our better selves, encouraging love to conquer hate, and light to dispel the gloom that can so easily settle upon the human spirit. It was a promise of emotional and spiritual resilience. Crucially, the original call of faith was a resounding cry for justice. It was meant to be a voice for the voiceless, a shield for the vulnerable, a force that challenged oppression in all its forms. The prophets and sages of old often stood against the powerful, denouncing exploitation and advocating for fairness. They envisioned societies where compassion and equity were not mere ideals, but lived realities. Religion was intended to stir the conscience, to inspire acts of righteousness, and to dismantle the structures that perpetuated suffering. It was a call to action, a divine mandate to heal a fractured world, and to champion the cause of the downtrodden, ensuring dignity for every soul. This threefold promise, the liberation of the mind, the uplifting of the heart, and the establishment of justice, represented faith's inherent power for profound positive transformation. It was a vision of humanity flourishing, guided by wisdom, sustained by love, and committed to fairness. This original blueprint stands in stark, tragic contrast to what religion often became in the hands of those who saw not a path to enlightenment, but an opportunity for dominion. The light it offered was too often stolen, its purpose twisted, its promise betrayed by those who crave power more than truth, and control more than compassion. Section 2, The Unholy Alliance, when tyrants and traitors seized the sacred. The bright dawn of faith's promise, however, soon encountered the shadows of human ambition. Religion, with its profound influence over hearts and minds, became an irresistible target for those who sought power. Tyrants, rulers with iron fists and insatiable appetites for control, recognized its potential. They saw that by co-opting faith, by weaving its narratives into their own agendas, they could command not just bodies, but souls. What was meant to free humanity became a tool for its subjugation. The sacred texts were reinterpreted, the rituals repurposed, all to legitimize earthly power and demand unquestioning obedience from the masses. The voice of God was twisted into the command of the king. Alongside the political despots came the merchants, those whose primary worship was reserved for profit. They saw in faith a marketplace, a fertile ground for exploitation. Spiritual solace, forgiveness, and even salvation were subtly then overtly transformed into commodities. These traders in belief understood that by controlling access to the sacred, by positioning themselves as indispensable intermediaries, they could extract immense wealth from the faithful. The temple became a marketplace, and piety a currency. This commercialization of the spiritual realm further eroded faith's core, turning a deeply personal journey into a transactional relationship, managed by those who held the keys to the new, spiritual economy. In these grasping hands, religion was reforged. It transformed from a source of comfort and guidance into a formidable weapon. Its teachings, once meant to inspire love and understanding, were sharpened into instruments of division and fear. It was used to justify wars, to sanctify conquests, and to demonize those who dared to believe differently. The banner of God was raised over battlefields, and holy words were invoked to bless acts of unspeakable cruelty. The innate human desire for connection with the divine was manipulated to fuel conflict, to build empires, and to maintain oppressive regimes, all under the guise of sacred duty or divine will. This hijacking was not accidental, it was a deliberate strategy. Scriptures were selectively quoted, inconvenient truths were ignored, and new doctrines were fabricated to support the ambitions of the powerful. Religious institutions often became intertwined with state apparatus, their leaders enjoying privilege and influence in exchange for legitimizing the ruling order. The pure stream of spiritual understanding was tainted by worldly concerns, its clarity lost in the murky waters of political maneuvering and economic greed. Faith, which had promised liberation, was now itself imprisoned, held captive by the very forces it was meant to transcend, serving agendas far removed from its original sacred intent. Section 3. Merchants of Misery, the profitable trade in fear and false forgiveness. Once faith became a tool for control, its new masters understood a grim truth: fear sells. They began to systematically cultivate and market dread. The promise of divine love was overshadowed by terrifying images of eternal damnation. The wrath of God, they preached, was swift and merciless, particularly for those who questioned or disobeyed their self-appointed interpreters. This constant drumbeat of fear was designed to paralyze critical thought, to ensure compliance through terror rather than through genuine conviction. The sacred space, once a sanctuary for the soul, was transformed into a courtroom where every believer stood perpetually accused, desperately seeking reprieve from an ever-present threat. Alongside fear, guilt became another valuable commodity in this corrupted spiritual economy. Human fallibility was no longer a condition for growth and learning, but a stain that required constant, often costly absolution. These merchants of misery positioned themselves as the sole purveyors of forgiveness, the gatekeepers of divine mercy. Peace of mind, a clear conscience, these were dangled as rewards for obedience, for financial contributions, for unwavering loyalty to the institution and its leaders. The natural human experience of remorse was exploited, twisted into a perpetual state of spiritual debt, ensuring followers remained tethered and dependent on those who claimed to hold the keys to their salvation. The psychological toll of this relentless campaign of fear and guilt was devastating. It fostered an environment of chronic anxiety where joy was suspect and doubt was a sin. Followers were taught to distrust their own judgment, their own innate moral compass, and to defer always to the authority of their spiritual superiors. This created a distorted understanding of the divine, not as a source of infinite love and compassion, but as a harsh, judgmental entity, appeased only through strict adherence to the rules laid down by its earthly representatives. The freedom promised by true faith was replaced by the heavy shackles of induced spiritual insecurity. This carefully orchestrated emotional manipulation served a clear purpose. It kept the flock manageable, compliant, and crucially, generous. A fearful, guilty congregation is far less likely to challenge authority, to ask uncomfortable questions, or to seek spiritual truths outside the prescribed channels. They are more likely to give generously, to obey unquestioningly, and to defend the very system that ensnares them. The sale of fear and the brokering of guilt were not merely theological errors, they were calculated strategies to consolidate power, amass wealth, and ensure the enduring dominance of those who had successfully hijacked faith for their own profane ends. Section 4. Sanctified Chains, How Holy Words Built Walls and Silenced Truth. The architects of this hijacked faith meticulously crafted messages tailored to different strata of society, ensuring the stability of their earthly kingdoms. To the poor, the suffering, the vast majority struggling under hardship, the message was simple and stark: obey. Religion was used to sanctify their lot, to preach that their poverty was a divine test, their suffering a path to heavenly reward, but only if borne with quiet submission. Their duty was to serve, to endure, to never question the divinely ordained order that kept them at the bottom. This spiritual anesthetic dulled the ache of injustice and discouraged any thought of rebellion against their masters. Conversely, to the rich and powerful, the message was one of affirmation and entitlement. You are blessed. Their wealth, their status, their privileges were presented not as products of exploitation or fortune, but as clear signs of divine favor. Religion provided a sacred veneer for their excesses, a justification for the glaring inequalities that defined their societies. Their continued prosperity was linked to their piety, or at least their patronage of the religious institutions that upheld this convenient theology. Thus, the existing social hierarchy was not just maintained, but divinely endorsed, making any challenge to it seem like a challenge to God himself. Upon this foundation of manipulated scripture and stratified blessings, empires were built. Holy words, meant to guide humanity towards enlightenment and compassion, were instead twisted into blueprints for earthly dominion and control, Conquests were launched in the name of God, entire civilizations subjugated under the banner of a faith they were forced to adopt. Legal systems, social norms, and political structures were all infused with religious justifications that served to reinforce the power of the ruling elite and the subservience of the masses. The sacred texts became the bedrock upon which empires of inequality and oppression were constructed, their walls built with fear and cemented with false promises. And what of those who saw through the charade? What of those whose conscience pricked, whose intellect questioned the distorted narratives? They were met with the full force of the established order. Dissent was not tolerated. It was branded as heresy, as a demonic temptation, as a threat to the very fabric of society and the salvation of souls. Questioners were silenced, their voices stifled through intimidation, excommunication, imprisonment, torture, or death. The pursuit of truth, the very essence of genuine spiritual seeking, became a perilous endeavor. In this way, the hijackers of faith ensured their empires of deception remained unchallenged, their sacred chains tightly bound around the hearts and minds of their followers. Section 1. The Gilded Pulpit, Symbols of Earthly Kingdoms. Take a moment, step back from the fervor, the enchanting music, the passionate speeches. Look closely. Observe the hands that gesture, the necks that are adorned, the very fabric that drapes these messengers of alleged divine will. You will often see gold rings, heavy and gleaming, catching the stage lights. You will notice royal robes, crafted from expensive materials, far removed from the simple cloth of humble prophets of old. These are not mere accessories. They are statements. They are symbols, carefully chosen, that speak a language louder than any sermon. This language is not always of God. Too often it speaks of earthly treasure and status. Consider the places from which these pronouncements of piety emanate. Are they humble dwellings, reflecting a life detached from worldly possessions? Frequently they are palaces of preachers, sprawling estates, luxurious compounds, headquarters that resemble corporate fortresses rather than spiritual sanctuaries. These structures stand as monuments not to humility or service, but to immense wealth and organizational power. They are built with the offerings of the faithful, brick by brick, cementing a visible testament to the leader's success in this world, even as they speak of treasures in the next. The contrast between the message and the mansion can be jarring, a silent sermon on priorities. How then are these conspicuous displays of wealth reconciled with teachings of simplicity and detachment? Often they are framed as blessings from God, tangible proof of divine favor. The preacher's prosperity is presented as a sign that God is with them, that their ministry is anointed. Some may argue these resources are necessary tools for spreading the word, for reaching more souls, for building a larger platform. The opulence, they might claim, is not for personal indulgence but for the glory of the mission itself. It is a persuasive narrative, one that can turn symbols of worldly gain into perceived evidence of spiritual success, further dazzling their devoted followers. Yet for those whose eyes are beginning to open, these gilded pulpits and ostentatious displays raise unsettling questions. Does a true messenger of a humble carpenter need such extravagance? Does a servant of the poor require a palace? The visual dissonance between the preached ideal of selflessness and the lived reality of affluence can become a powerful catalyst for doubt. These symbols of earthly kingdoms, meant to inspire awe, can instead become the first cracks in the facade, revealing that the business of belief might be very lucrative indeed for those at its helm, demanding a closer look at the true cost of such splendor. Listen to the sermons extolling humility. They preach meekness and selflessness. Followers are encouraged to submit and consider others greater. Yet observe the dynamic between preacher and congregation. Leaders demand unwavering loyalty for themselves. They quote scripture to support their narratives. Verses on obedience are emphasized, while calls for justice are downplayed. The sermon becomes a theatrical production. The goal shifts from spiritual nourishment to consolidating authority. True leadership seeks to elevate others. Instead, loyalty to the person becomes paramount. The double-edged sermon carves out a domain where the preacher reigns supreme. In these systems, independent thought is a threat. Knowledge is branded as rebellion. Intellectual curiosity is reframed as dangerous. Safety lies in conformity, danger in inquiry. Truth becomes heresy if it challenges authority. Dissent is silenced, maintaining the leader's monopoly on truth. A closed information ecosystem is cultivated. Followers are discouraged from exploring outside perspectives. The leader's voice is amplified, dissent filtered out. The congregation becomes intellectually stunted, inquiry is punished, ensuring a steady supply of unquestioning followers. Sermons often end with a tangible request: give us your money. Tithing is presented as an obligation for divine favor. Faith becomes transactional. Beyond money, they seek your children. Controlling upbringing ensures a continued lineage of followers. Children are indoctrinated before they can question. The final demand: don't ask questions. Doubt is portrayed as a weakness. Questions are discouraged, ensuring the leader's authority remains absolute. Belief is packaged as a product. Followers provide revenue through donations and loyalty. The price is financial resources, the minds of children, and autonomy. Centuries ago, daughters were buried alive. Religions emerged, challenging such brutal acts. They offered a vision of inherent worth. But old thinking reasserted itself. Patriarchy resisted true change. Faith became a mask for continued control. Today, daughters are still harmed, their bodies policed, choices curtailed. The methods have changed, but control persists. It is the same ancient wound, manifesting in new scars. Religion spoke of compassion and justice, but culture twisted these teachings. The liberation promised was stalled. Faith became a tool for control. The echoes of ancient pain remain. The wound has not fully healed. Women are still oppressed in the name of modesty. Their potential limited, voices muffled. This is not divine, but a human construct of power, a cruel distortion of true spiritual values. Modesty can be a virtue, a personal choice. But in the hands of controllers, it warps. It becomes a weapon against women. Their conduct and dress scrutinized. Women were locked away, confined to private spaces. Their potential limited, voices muffled. This was not for God's sake, but due to insecure men. Men who feared female strength and craved control. Consider the hijab, a profound act of faith for many. But when imposed, it becomes a prison. The true motive is often power, not spiritual purity. Men who feel threatened by female autonomy. Their fear becomes her cage. Their weakness dictates her life. Modesty becomes a tool for control. It limits women's freedom and potential. This is not about faith, but about power, a distortion of true spiritual values. Sin, a word heavy with judgment. In many systems, its definition narrows, focusing on women, a woman's body and choices deemed inherently tempting, men's transgressions excused, women's magnified, sex twisted into the ultimate sin for women. Their desires, if expressed, were shameful. They were taught to fear their own nature, to live under a cloud of potential guilt. This was a soul-crushing burden. Honor, a word signifying integrity, was weaponized. Her chastity and obedience measured family honor. Her life belonged to others, upholding their reputation. A single misstep could bring catastrophic shame. Honor became a cage, limiting women's freedom. It justified violence and control, lives ruined, futures stolen. This is not divine, but a human construct of power, a cruel distortion of true spiritual values. Women's lives controlled in the name of honor, a burden they should not bear. Look closely at these rules that bind women. Often presented as God's command, but are they truly divine? Or are they cultural accretions, human inventions? Man-made yokes, not God-given guidance. Who benefits from these chains? Not God. The beneficiaries are insecure men, those who fear female equality. Their anxieties shape these so-called sacred rules. They twist faith to maintain power. True faith calls for justice and compassion. It affirms the dignity of every soul. These core messages are buried beneath cultural bias. An awakening is essential. We must distinguish between divine guidance and cultural prisons. Challenge man-made structures of oppression. Reclaim faith from patriarchal control. Restore its liberating spirit, for the sake of women everywhere, for a more just and compassionate humanity. In the heart of almost every faith tradition, a profound reverence for life is enshrined. Every true scripture, every ancient wisdom, whispers a sacred command. It is a directive that resonates across cultures and through millennia. Do not kill. More specifically, do not kill the innocent. This is not a minor suggestion, a footnote in the divine law. It is a cornerstone, a foundational principle upon which moral order is built, an unspoken covenant between humanity and the Creator. Protect life, cherish it, defend it. This universal ethic underscores the intrinsic value of each human being. It recognizes a spark of the divine in every soul. To extinguish a life, particularly an innocent one, is therefore an affront, an act of supreme sacrilege, a violation of the most sacred trust. The prophets and sages understood this deeply. They taught compassion, mercy, and the sanctity of existence. Their words were meant to guide us away from bloodshed, towards peace, towards understanding, towards mutual respect. This was the path to true righteousness. Consider the weight of these pronouncements. They are not ambiguous. They are not hidden in obscure verses. They are clear, direct, and unequivocal. The sanctity of life is a recurring theme, a golden thread woven through the tapestry of religious thought. From the tablets of Moses to the teachings of Jesus, from the wisdom of Buddha to the revelations of Muhammad, the message is consistent. Life is precious, and the taking of innocent life is a grievous wrong, a trespass against both God and humanity. Yet how quickly this fundamental truth is forgotten, or more chillingly, how deliberately it is twisted. The clarity of do not kill the innocent becomes clouded, obscured by justifications, by exceptions, by reinterpretations. Those who seek to spill blood in God's name must first silence this core command. They must bury it under layers of hateful rhetoric, or carve out exemptions that serve their violent agendas. The most sacred teachings are thus made to serve the most profane ends. A tragic betrayal of faith's loving heart. The first casualty in holy war is often this primary truth. How does this betrayal take root? How is the sacred command to preserve life so easily overturned? It begins when individuals or groups claim absolute divine authority. They elevate themselves, asserting a unique connection to God's will, a will that conveniently aligns with their own desires for power or vengeance. They declare their enemies to be God's enemies, their wars to be God's wars, their bloodshed to be a holy purifying act. This claim of divine sanction is a potent, dangerous drug. It intoxicates followers and silences dissent. With this self-proclaimed authority, they reinterpret sacred texts. They cherry-pick verses, tearing them from their historical and ethical context. They magnify passages that speak of conflict or judgment. While ignoring the overwhelming calls for peace and mercy, Scripture becomes a weapon in their hands, a divine justification for earthly atrocities. They twist words of love into warrants for hate, and messages of hope into calls for destruction. The voice of God is distorted, made to echo their own violent ambitions, a chilling ventriloquism of the divine. They tell their followers that to kill is not a sin, but a duty, a path to righteousness, a service to the Almighty. They promise heavenly rewards for earthly violence, and eternal damnation for those who refuse to participate. Fear and fervor are expertly manipulated, creating an army of believers willing to commit any act, all in the name of a God they no longer truly recognize, a God refashioned in the image of their leaders' cruelty. This is the ultimate perversion of faith, turning devotion into a license for destruction. But what kind of God demands the slaughter of innocents? What kind of divine authority revels in bloodshed? The gods they invoke seem deaf to the cries of the murdered, deaf to the anguish of shattered families, deaf to the pleas for mercy. Their gods are not gods of compassion or justice. They are idols of power, greed, and hatred, forged in the fires of human ambition. The divine authority they claim is a blasphemous lie, a cloak for their own profane desires stained with innocent blood. Section 3. Echoes of Slaughter. When Scripture becomes a sword, consider the devastating consequences of this deception. How many bombs fall in God's name? How many cities lie in ruins, their people displaced or dead? The sky rains down destruction, called forth by prayers to a God of vengeance. Each explosion is a testament to twisted faith, each crater a scar on the face of humanity. The perpetrators often believe they are righteous. They see themselves as soldiers in a holy war, executing divine judgment upon the wicked. And the children. How many children are slaughtered with a verse as an excuse? Their small bodies torn apart by shrapnel, their innocent lives extinguished before they have truly begun. They die in their homes, in their schools, in their playgrounds. Victims of a conflict they did not choose, did not understand. Their killers may cite scripture. They may claim to be cleansing the world of infidels. But what sacred text truly sanctions such barbarity? What God delights in the murder of a child? The cries of these innocents rise to the heavens, a haunting chorus of pain and disbelief. Do those who claim to speak for God hear these cries? Or are their hearts hardened, their ears deafened by their own rhetoric? They offer excuses wrapped in holy words. They dehumanize their victims, branding them as other, as collateral damage, as necessary sacrifices, as obstacles on the path to their glorious blood-soaked utopia. But no verse, no doctrine can ever truly excuse such acts. The slaughter of the innocent remains an unforgivable sin. This use of scripture as a sword is a profound tragedy. It turns sources of wisdom and comfort into manuals for murder. It transforms communities of faith into armies of hate. It pits believer against believer, religion against religion, all while the true message of love and compassion is drowned out by the shouts of fanatics and the screams of their victims. The echoes of slaughter reverberate through history, a chilling reminder of how easily faith can be weaponized, and how desperately we need to reclaim its true, life-affirming spirit, before more innocents pay the ultimate price. Section 4. The Paradox of Piety Salvation Preached, Savagery Unleashed. There is a deep, disturbing paradox at the heart of this violence. Those who commit these atrocities often preach salvation. They speak of eternal life, of heavenly rewards, of spiritual purity. They present themselves as guides to a higher realm, as purifiers of a corrupted world. Their words are filled with promises of redemption, of a future where peace and justice will reign. A future, they claim, that can only be achieved through conflict, through the elimination of those they deem unholy or unworthy. This is the grand, deceptive promise they offer. Yet, while their mouths speak of salvation, their hands are busy lighting the fires of war. They sow division, hatred, and chaos. They turn neighbor against neighbor, brother against brother. They unleash unimaginable suffering upon the world, all under the banner of their violent piety. The salvation they offer is built on a foundation of corpses. The peace they promise is the peace of the grave. This is not the path to any true spiritual awakening. It is a descent into the darkest aspects of human nature. How can one preach love while practicing such profound hate? How can one speak of God's mercy while showing none? This hypocrisy is staggering, yet it often goes unchallenged. Followers, caught in the grip of fervor and fear, fail to see the contradiction, or they are convinced that such brutality is a necessary evil, a painful but essential step towards a greater good. They are taught that the enemies of God deserve no compassion, that their destruction is a holy imperative. The architects of this violence are masters of cognitive dissonance, able to reconcile the most contradictory beliefs and actions. Ultimately, the salvation they preach is a mirage, a dangerous illusion that leads only to more suffering. True salvation cannot be found at the end of a gun or in the ashes of a bombed city. It is found in compassion, in forgiveness, in understanding, in the difficult, patient work of building bridges, not walls. Those who light the fires of war in God's name are not servants of the divine. They are agents of destruction, betraying the very essence of faith, and leading humanity further into darkness, not towards the light. Section 1. The Invented War. Why faith need not fear fact. Why would a man of God fear a microscope? What could possibly make him tremble before a telescope's gaze into the heavens? Why would any true spiritual guide fear a simple, honest question? These instruments, these inquiries, are merely tools for understanding the world we inhabit, a world that, if one believes, was crafted by a divine hand. So the fear itself seems illogical. It hints at an insecurity. It suggests that the foundations of what is being preached are perhaps not as solid as claimed, vulnerable to the light of new knowledge. True faith, confident in its source, should welcome every lens that offers a clearer view of reality. This supposed war between science and faith is often a carefully constructed illusion. It is a conflict manufactured by those who have the most to lose from an enlightened populace. These are the gatekeepers of dogma, the purveyors of unquestionable truths. They fear that scientific discovery might contradict their rigid interpretations. They worry that a congregation encouraged to think critically might begin to see the flaws in their pronouncements, the self-interest behind their spiritual authority. So they paint science as a godless adversary, a dangerous path away from salvation, rather than a complementary way of knowing. This manufactured conflict serves only to protect their fragile thrones of influence. Yet genuine faith, a faith rooted in the pursuit of ultimate truth, has no reason to fear facts. If God is the author of all creation, then the book of nature and the book of Revelation cannot fundamentally contradict each other. They are simply different languages telling aspects of the same grand story. Any apparent conflict often arises from limited human understanding, from flawed interpretations of either scripture or scientific data. A faith that is truly alive is dynamic. It grows with new understanding. It seeks to integrate all forms of knowledge, rather than retreating into the narrow confines of willful ignorance, shielding itself from progress. The fear of science, therefore, is not truly a spiritual stance. It is a political one. It is a strategy of control. By demonizing independent inquiry and the evidence-based reasoning that science champions, these leaders aim to maintain a monopoly on truth. They seek to keep their followers dependent, reliant solely on their pronouncements. They understand that a mind accustomed to questioning, to seeking evidence, is a mind less likely to submit blindly. The invented war against science is, in reality, a desperate attempt to keep minds in comforting, controllable darkness, away from the illuminating power of discovery. Section 2, Sacred Mandates, the call to explore and understand. The resistance to science by some religious figures is not only illogical, it often stands in direct contradiction to the very scriptures they claim to uphold. Many sacred texts are not silent on the value of intellectual pursuit, they actively encourage it. The Quran, for instance, emphatically states, "Think." This is not a gentle suggestion, it is a divine imperative. It calls upon believers to use their intellect, to ponder, to reflect upon the signs in the universe. This act of thinking, of engaging the mind, is presented as a pathway to understanding God and His creation, a form of worship in itself. Similarly, the Bible offers encouragement for those who seek knowledge. It says, "Seek, and you will find, knock, and the door will be opened to you." This implies a proactive stance, a diligent search for truth, not a passive acceptance of received doctrines. The pursuit of understanding is framed as a journey that will be rewarded. The Torah, too, places immense value on learning and understanding. It encourages deep study and interpretation, fostering a tradition of rigorous intellectual engagement with sacred teachings and the world. These are not calls for blind faith, but for an engaged, searching, and understanding faith. These divine invitations to explore and understand are not confined to a select few scholars or mystics. They are extended to all humanity. They suggest that using our God-given intellect is a fundamental part of the human experience, a way to connect more deeply with the Creator and the intricate tapestry of existence. To discourage thinking, to condemn questioning, is to effectively ask believers to diminish a vital part of their humanity. It is to tell them to ignore the very tools of discernment that their faith traditions often celebrate as divine gifts meant for active use. Therefore, true religion, far from being an enemy of science, should be its natural ally. The spirit of inquiry that drives scientific discovery, the desire to understand how the world works, to uncover its underlying principles, is perfectly aligned with these sacred mandates. When faith encourages us to think, to seek, and to understand, it is essentially inviting us to engage with the world in a way that science embodies. The pursuit of knowledge, whether through spiritual reflection or empirical investigation, can be seen as two wings of the same bird, both essential for soaring towards a more complete understanding of truth. Why would a person of faith fear the intricate world revealed by a microscope? This simple instrument, a marvel of human ingenuity, opens a window onto realities previously unseen. It shows us the breathtaking complexity of a single cell, the delicate dance of microorganisms, the hidden architecture of life itself. Far from diminishing a sense of the divine, such revelations can profoundly deepen our awe. They display a level of intricate design and purpose that can inspire a greater appreciation for the mind behind such creation. The infinitesimally small speaks volumes of an immense intelligence. And what of the telescope, an instrument that turns our gaze towards the heavens? Why would this provoke anxiety in a believer? The telescope shatters our limited earthbound perspectives, unveiling the staggering vastness of the cosmos. It shows us swirling galaxies, distant nebulae where stars are born, and a universe of such scale and grandeur that it can leave us speechless. This cosmic panorama, far from making God seem smaller, can expand our conception of divine power and creativity beyond anything our ancestors could have imagined. The immense universe reflects an even more immense creator whose artistry is boundless. These instruments, the microscope and the telescope, are not weapons against faith. They are extensions of our senses, tools that allow us to perceive more of reality. They offer new vistas, new perspectives on the universe and our place within it. For someone whose faith is grounded in a belief in a creator, these tools can transform abstract concepts into tangible wonder. They provide evidence not of a chaotic, meaningless universe, but of one filled with intricate order, profound beauty, and astonishing complexity, from the smallest particle to the largest cosmic structure. For a faith that is secure in its truth, every new scientific discovery should be a cause for celebration, not a source of fear. Each layer of complexity unveiled, each mystery solved, is like turning another page in the grand book of creation. Science in this light becomes a handmaiden to theology, providing fresh insights and deeper appreciations of the divine artistry. It allows us to see the world not as a static, finished product, but as a dynamic, evolving masterpiece, constantly revealing new facets of its creator's genius. The windows opened by science can lead to a more profound, more informed, and more wondrous faith. Section 4. The Liberated Intellect, Resisting the Shackles of Ignorance. So, if science itself, with its tools and discoveries, can enhance our appreciation of creation, what is the true source of this fear displayed by some religious leaders? The fear is not truly of the microscope, nor of the telescope, nor of the data they provide. The real fear, the deep-seated anxiety, is directed at something far more fundamental: the liberated intellect. It is the questioning mind, the mind that dares to ask why and how, that truly unsettles those who rely on unquestioning obedience. This is the mind that seeks understanding for itself. Those who position themselves as infallible authorities, the false prophets and peddlers of fear, dread the empowered mind. They understand that a mind awakened to its own capacity for reason and critical thought cannot be easily enslaved. A mind that has tasted the freedom of inquiry will not long remain content with simplistic answers or blind adherence to dogma. It will challenge inconsistencies, it will demand evidence, and it will seek out its own pathways to truth. This intellectual autonomy is a direct threat to any system built upon the suppression of individual thought and the concentration of interpretive power in the hands of a few. A mind that thinks critically, that explores ideas freely, and that values evidence is a formidable challenge to the gatekeepers of enforced belief. It refuses to be confined by the narrow walls of their prescribed doctrines. It sees beyond the veils of manipulative rhetoric. The fear of science, then, is often a proxy for the fear of intellectual freedom. It is an attempt to keep the mind in shackles, to prevent it from wandering into territories where the leader's control might be diminished or broken entirely. They prefer followers who do not think too much, who do not question too deeply. Real faith, however, has nothing to fear from a liberated intellect. In fact, it should celebrate it. It should trust that an open, honest mind, earnestly seeking truth, will ultimately find its way to what is genuine and enduring. The true enemy is not science, nor is it the questioning spirit. The true enemy is the deliberate cultivation of ignorance, the intentional stunting of intellectual growth, all for the sake of maintaining power and control. Awakening means embracing our God-given capacity to think, to explore, and to understand, for it is in this freedom that true spiritual maturity is found. Observe them closely. Those who scream hell loudest at others, their voices drip with condemnation, their fingers point with unwavering certainty. They paint vivid portraits of eternal torment. For sins they eagerly identify in everyone but themselves. They appoint themselves as divine judges, casting down verdicts from their self-made thrones of piety. Their pronouncements are designed to instill fear, a fear they wield like a shepherd's cruelest rod. Yet consider the profound irony. These self-proclaimed arbiters of eternal fate may be the very first in line to enter that fiery abyss. Their accusations against others often mask their own failings. The sins they so vehemently decry in public may mirror the shadows lurking within their private lives. They demand a standard of purity from the world, while their own hands are often stained with deceit and manipulation. The righteous anger they display can be a carefully constructed performance, a distraction from the hollowness of their own spiritual core. This obsession with the transgressions of others is telling. It speaks volumes about their own inner turmoil. Could it be that their relentless focus on external sin is a desperate attempt to avoid confronting their own demons? The venom they spew outwards may be a poison that has long been festering within their own souls. They project their own spiritual sickness onto the world, hoping that by condemning others they might somehow feel clean. But the dirt they throw only soils their own hands further. Their judgments are often a confession in disguise. Ultimately, if divine justice truly exists, it will not be swayed by loud pronouncements or feigned holiness. The measure they use for others will be used for them. The harshness they dispense will be returned in kind. Those who build their platforms on the condemnation of souls may find themselves facing a judgment far more severe. Their eagerness to assign others to damnation could be a chilling prophecy of their own spiritual destiny. The gates of the hell they so vividly describe might swing open to welcome its most ardent advertisers first. These figures of proclaimed authority do more than just judge. They expertly twist faith itself. What was meant to be a path to liberation, a direct connection between a soul and its creator, becomes in their hands a complex system of control. They rewrite the rules of spiritual engagement. They insert themselves into the sacred space where once only the divine and the seeker stood. Now there stands a middleman, a gatekeeper, demanding allegiance, demanding conformity. They become the self-appointed connectors, the indispensable bridge between you and your God. They tell you their guidance is essential, their interpretations are the only true path. Without their sanction, without their blessing, you are led to believe you are spiritually adrift, lost. Access to divine grace, to forgiveness, to salvation itself is presented as a transaction that must pass through their office. They build toll booths on the sacred highways of faith, and you must pay their price to proceed. But pause and ask the fundamental question. Why would an all-powerful God, a limitless creator, a source of infinite love and boundless mercy, need such human gatekeepers to manage his affairs? Why would the divine require a bureaucratic structure of intermediaries? Can the vastness of God's presence be contained or his grace rationed by flawed human beings? This notion is an insult to the very concept of an omnipotent God. It diminishes the divine, making it subject to human control. It suggests a creator too weak or too distant to connect directly. The truth is, this need for a gatekeeper is their invention. It serves their agenda, not God's. It consolidates their power, their influence, their wealth. By making themselves essential, they ensure their own survival. They are not shepherds guiding you to God. They are often wardens, keeping you within their prescribed boundaries. Their authority is not granted from on high. It is seized, manufactured, and maintained through careful manipulation. The Creator needs no such bouncers at the gates of mercy. The invitation from the divine has always been an open one. Section 3. Defying the divine, the self-woven path to damnation. If the Creator did not command these complex hierarchies, if he did not mandate these layers of human authority, if he did not require these self-appointed toll collectors, then why do they insist on their necessity? Whose purpose do these structures truly serve? Their elaborate systems of control, their pronouncements of exclusive truth, are not built upon divine blueprints. They are edifices of human ambition, cemented by fear. They impose rules that God never intended, and demand an obedience that God never asked for in this way. These false preachers, in their quest for dominion, are not only deceiving you, their trusting followers. They are engaging in a far graver transgression. They are, with every manipulative sermon, with every act of control, actively defying their own God. They usurp a divine prerogative, placing themselves in God's stead. They attempt to manage the unmanageable, to control the uncontrollable. Their rebellion is not against earthly powers. It is a silent, insidious rebellion against the very source of all being. A profound arrogance dressed in the robes of feigned humility. Consider the devastating impact of their lies. If their teachings are distortions, carefully crafted deceptions, if their promises of salvation are tied to their own enrichment, then they are not merely misleading you on a minor point of doctrine, they are poisoning the wells of spiritual sustenance. They are leading sincere, searching souls away from genuine connection, into a labyrinth of fear, obligation, and false hope. The spiritual damage they inflict is immense, robbing individuals of their autonomy, their direct line to the sacred, and replacing it with dependence on a fraudulent authority. Ultimately, the web of deceit they weave ensnares them most completely. These false shepherds are not just leading their flock astray, they are damning themselves. With every soul they exploit, with every truth they twist, with every act of hypocrisy that elevates them while oppressing others, they carve their own path towards spiritual desolation. The hell they so readily prescribe for those who disobey them may well be the very destination they are meticulously constructing for their own souls. Their great hypocrisy is not just a betrayal of humanity, it is a profound act of self-destruction, a defiance that seals their own fate. Section 1. Your unquestionable mandate, the birthright of inquiry. You were not born into this world to merely obey, not to blindly follow a man in robes no matter his claims. Your spirit was not designed for unquestioning submission. Your existence is not a sentence to servitude. You were crafted for something far greater, far more profound. A destiny woven with threads of freedom and awareness. This is your inherent birthright, an undeniable truth. To stand tall, not to kneel in perpetual deference. Your soul carries a spark of the divine, a spark of inquiry. Know this first, you were meant to be free. You were born to ask, to let curiosity be your compass, your guide. Questions are not acts of rebellion against the sacred. They are the very language of a searching heart. They are the keys that unlock deeper understanding. Do not let anyone silence your inquiries. Do not let anyone tell you that doubt is a sin, for it is through questioning that we often find the truest answers. The path to wisdom is paved with courageous questions. Ask and keep asking until clarity dawns in your own mind. You were born to challenge, to look beyond the surface, beyond the easy answers, to scrutinize the claims of those who demand your allegiance. Challenging dogma is not an attack on faith. It is a defense of truth, a refusal to accept falsehoods. Growth often requires the courage to confront entrenched beliefs, even those dressed in the most sacred of garments. If a teaching cannot withstand scrutiny, it is not worthy of your belief. Dare to challenge the narratives that seek to confine you, for in that challenge lies the seed of your liberation. You were born to grow, to expand your understanding, to evolve your spirit. This journey of growth is a lifelong endeavor. It is fueled by your capacity to think, to reason, to learn. Thinking is not a forbidden act. It is a sacred process. It is how you engage with the world, how you discover your path. Embrace new knowledge, new perspectives, new experiences. Allow your beliefs to mature, to deepen, to become truly your own. For human beings are not meant for stagnation. We are meant to reach, to stretch, to become more. Section 2. Shattering the Shackles, Reclaiming Your Divine Intellect. God, the source of all that is, gave you a mind. This intricate, powerful instrument of thought and reason. It was not gifted to you as a mere ornament. It was not intended for you to hand it over to another. Not to a preacher, not to a guru, not to any self-proclaimed authority. Your mind is a sacred trust, a divine endowment. It is yours to nurture, yours to sharpen, yours to command. Its purpose is to explore, to discern, to understand. To abdicate your intellect is to refuse a precious gift. Use it, for it is the key to your awakening. Therefore reject the fear. This potent poison so often peddled from pulpits of power. Fear is the currency of control, the weapon of manipulators. It cripples the spirit, it clouds judgment, it breeds obedience. But you are stronger than the fears they sow. Look them in the eye and see them for what they are. Illusions. Illusions designed to keep you small, to keep you dependent. Choose courage over comfort, choose truth over terror. Let love, not fear, be the guiding light of your faith. For perfect love, true faith, casts out all fear, and reject the lies. The carefully constructed falsehoods, the half-truths, the deceptions. Those narratives spun to ensnare your heart and mind. You have the capacity to see through them. Learn to listen to your inner voice, your intuition. It will often whisper when something feels wrong, untrue. Seek knowledge from diverse sources, not just the approved ones. Compare, contrast, analyze, and decide for yourself. Truth does not need to be shouted. It resonates quietly within. Do not allow your spirit to be fed on a diet of deception. Reject the cages dressed in scripture, those prisons built from twisted interpretations and dogmatic demands. Sacred texts were meant to liberate, not to incarcerate. They were meant to inspire, not to intimidate. When religion is used to build walls instead of bridges, when it is used to condemn instead of to comfort, it is being misused, perverted from its true purpose. Do not confuse the container with the content. Do not mistake the human interpretation for the divine word. Your faith should be a source of freedom, not a gilded cage. Section 3. The Dawn of True Sight, where authentic faith begins. So now the call echoes deep within your being. Awaken. Shake off the slumber of blind acceptance. Open your eyes to the world as it truly is. Step out from the shadows of imposed ignorance. Feel the stirring of your own sovereign spirit. This moment of awakening is a profound rebirth. It is the beginning of seeing with your own eyes, hearing with your own ears, thinking with your own mind. The power to awaken has always been within you. Because real faith starts, it truly ignites, when blind following ends, when you cease to outsource your spiritual journey, when you stop looking for answers only from external authorities. True faith is not about adherence to a checklist of doctrines. It is not about unquestioning loyalty to an institution or a leader. It is a deeply personal, dynamic, and evolving relationship. A connection with the divine that is uniquely yours. This is the faith that empowers, that transforms. This is the faith that sets you free. Reclaim your faith, reclaim your power. Let it be a faith rooted in love, not fear, in compassion, not condemnation, in understanding, not blind obedience. Question everything. Seek your own truth. Trust the guidance of your own awakened conscience. Your spiritual path is yours to walk, with courage and integrity. No one can walk it for you. No one can own your connection to the sacred. This reclaimed faith will be a fortress for your soul, a beacon of light in a world too often shrouded in darkness. This is the Great Awakening, the journey from passive belief to active, conscious faith. It requires courage, it requires honesty, it requires thought, but the rewards are immeasurable: freedom, integrity, and a genuine connection. You were not born to be a blind follower. You were born to be a seeker of light, a champion of truth. Use your mind, embrace your power, awaken, for your true spiritual journey begins now. The age of deception can end, one awakened soul at a time, and it starts with you.